Today is March
20th, yeah, Thursday.
2003, and we're at the St. Mary's Manor
Yes,
in St. Mary's, Kansas,
right,
and we're meeting Victoria E. Charobic,
right, you got it right.
who was born September the 25th, 1918.
18, right,
So you're like 85 years
now,
old now.
yes, yes,
And I'm Dean Schoengert, and I will be interviewing you today.
okay.
How was it that you joined the military?
Because we wanted to. My sister worked for the government. She worked for the OPA, Price Administrations. And she heard that the Army needed nurses because our men were depleting, being, by battle. You were losing the men, you didn't have any replacement for the other duties in service. So they said, if you don't take this award that you have offered now, she said they can go and draft you. Anyway, they were going to draft us nurses and send you to Timbuktu, and then you have no authority. She said it's better to take it, you get your title and you get your salary as an officer. That's where we went in.
And when did you go into the service?
July 1st, 1943.
And where did you go first?
Well, the first was to Camp Pickett, Virginia. That's where our MRTC station was located. It's a medical station. And our officer that was in charge was Major Miller for the nurses. But the officer over the whole regiment here on the premises was Colonel Hassett, Hassett.
How long had you been a nurse before you?
Oh, I've been.
Before you went into the service?
Well, let's see. I'd have to. I graduated 1941.
So a couple years.
41. Yes. Oh, yes. I did general duty for experience first.
So then.
Before I took any kind of a permanent job, I didn't. We had no. I had no difficulty of getting a position near the chief. But she was doing anesthesia already at West Penn, Western Pennsylvania Hospital. And I was just a graduate, and so I did a year of general duty for experience. I had to have it.
So what was your first nursing job with the military?
Well, it was in Blackstone, Virginia. That's where we were with the MRTC, medical unit.
And what kind of patients did you have there?
Everything, anything, any casualties from the front, or any ship, or civilians even. They hauled everybody in because you're overseas. When you were overseas, you took care of everyone. You didn't neglect them. You just took care of them. And then when you needed additional help, they would call on other services. See, now the Navy had the waves that were officers. And the WACs had their officers for the Army. They were stationed in the laundries, doing stuff like that, and where they had gasoline tanks, things like that's where they used these girls in the offices, and that to be at the head to manage those places. See, that's what.
So you were a second lieutenant to start with?
Oh yes, right off, because we got our commission. What
was your worst experience there at that hospital?
I think one of the most frightening was when the atomic bomb was going to be thrown. We heard that. And we lived in tents overseas. They had improvised with foot lockers we sat on as seats and chairs.
Well, let's go from your Virginia position, then you went overseas from there?
On the New Year's Eve from state of Washington, Seattle, Washington.
Oh. How did you get across the nation?
Well, this is what they had us in the Army trucks. They took us just like any one of the soldiers, We were all in gear with the funny suits, I forget what we call them now. Some call them monkey suits, but I don't prefer calling them. There's another term that we used for
jumpsuits, were they?
Well, something like that, yeah. So we had a lot of fun.
You took the train across to Seattle? And then a ship?
And that ship was waiting for us from Seattle, Washington. It was waiting, but the trucks brought us to Seattle
Yeah.
to meet the truck that would take us to Seattle. And then we went aboard ship. They had a ship for us.
What kind of experience was that on ship?
Oh, that was quite different, because every time you went down, you felt you were sinking down. It would hit the low level, then you'd come up again in the waves. I'm telling you, we didn't sleep that night.
Was this like a troop ship or?
Huh? It was a troop ship. It was just what the men used. They had the barges. When we hit the beach, the thing went down, the barrier that they had, they loosened it, and we walked up with our pack. We had musette bags that we carried different supplies for ourselves.
Were a lot of nurses on board?
No, just the ones that were in service. There weren't
Yeah,
very
of
many
course,
of us.
not
no.
many.
Because then we had the field hospital join us, and the other hospitals, whatever they had, they would send. But the Navy nurses never had, because they were stationary to do the desk work for the Navy. But we as Army did everything. We didn't care. We took care of everybody equally.
Well, where were you assigned then when you got
I
overseas?
was on one of the wards, one of the big wards in the Quonset huts.
And
That's where they
where
put
was
us up,
this?
because they had a tornado, and we were all in this shelter of the Navy. They called us in because it was just erasing everything. This was in Seattle, Washington, when we got off. Yeah, it was so muddy and everything from the hurricane that came along, and that was fantastic. I'll never forget that. You can close your eyes and dream about it, that you're there. But we were in Eniwetok, Ulithi, Okinawa, and the other places.
You kept moving from one
we did.
island to the next.
Right. Wherever they needed us, we were there to take care of everybody. And like we said, made no difference whether they were civilian working for the Navy or the Army or anybody. We took care of everybody equally. And that's why no one was left without care. Everybody had care. That's what we were there for, to help people.
Did you have adequate supplies and medicines?
Most of the times we had, yeah, especially bandages and things that we knew how to bandage and put on plaster cast, because we had special training in it. I took a postgraduate course in New York City in orthopedic before I joined service. All these additional things, so I was ahead of the game.
Were you happy with the doctors you had?
Oh yeah, they were very nice. They were so glad to see the women, not only all these men that they had as patients, you know, but they said, oh, even an Army nurse, they said they could hug her anytime. Just so they said, don't leave, just stay here. We'll put you up for the night. I said, well, what do we have? He said, well, these cots do. I said, those regular ones that the guys use. They said, yeah. I said, well, that's good enough. It's good enough for them. It's good enough for us. So that's the way we slept. And it was terrifying, because especially atomic bomb, when it was dropped on Hiroshima, you could just hear the vibration of the ground miles and miles away. Tremor, you know, the tremors of it. I'm telling you, you never experienced something like that in all of your life unless you were on a battlefield, and that's the way we felt. We were there.
Was that Okinawa?
Mm-hmm.
And you felt the bomb
You
from
could
Okinawa?
feel it, sure, because my girlfriend, who was with me all the time, my buddy, because then they separated, when we were going overseas, they separated my sister and me. They put me on a little boat called the Tabinta, little ship called Tabinta, and she was on the Wreckham Beckham, they called it, the elite Navy boat, the real long, that carried thousands of troops. They did that because of the Sullivan brothers that were killed, you know, that went under and never. They said, we have for the trip, you're gonna have to be separated. So then, I said, well, I want some of my friends with me. So they gave me the girls that I wanted, my friends from the army, and we all went together, 12 of us. So that was adequate, a number of girls for the time we figured until we got there, you know, until they got to us on the island. Then we knew we hit the yellow beach, the purple beach. That's what the beaches were identified by color, yellow and purple and other colors of the rainbow. Mm-hmm. That's the way we knew. So
that was for landing on Okinawa.
Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, that first day that we worked, we were so busy. There were so many casualties. There wasn't even room under a tent. We had to just put them side by side because a lot of them that they couldn't save, we couldn't save, but we fought for them. We did everything humanly possible, and we were so happy that we were able to get a great portion of these guys. Otherwise, they would be just thrown and covered with dirt. That's the way they buried them overseas. It was crude, but what else could you do? You don't have all the equipment there. But that was one of the most frightening things, was the A-bomb. My girlfriend's husband, who was her boyfriend at the time, he was he was a staff sergeant, I think she said, or something. I don't recall now, but anyway, he helped to build the atomic bomb. He was a chemist and that. And he was very brilliant because to be selected as one of the 4 men, you knew he would have a high rating, and he did. And she and I were buddies. But my sister would come to the Navy. The skipper of their ship, of the Beckham, when we would get the mail from home, which was held up for so many days, because of the, battle going on to and fro, and the different ships were stopped and pulled aside, and for different reasons. I'm telling you, I've never seen such state of confusion in all my life. That, well, we had to do what we had to. That's all you could do, because we were trying to hurry to try to save as many men as possible. And if you couldn't, I mean, it made you feel bad, but you had to keep on going. You didn't have time to feel sorry, because we were glad we were so busy we didn't even know what was going around. We saw the casualties, we would just go from one individual to another. That's the way we did it. And we'll never forget that to the day we die.
Very exhausting.
It was tiring, but it was a different feeling over there and then what you were in the States. When you were overseas, you were trying to help. It seems these men were just like reaching out for you to do something, help me. And you just had that feeling, I gotta get him. So you just kept on working. You didn't have time for rest, for breaks, like nowadays they have, which is wonderful and stuff. We didn't. We just had to go and work around the clock, and we said, until we worked until we dropped. When it was too tired, the doctor said, quit, come on and have at least a couple hours of sleep, and that's the way it was, from day to day.
Were you ever sick yourself?
It was except one thing, when we got up, I got so nauseous, I started heaving aboard ship. All those girls, because you're working so hard, and you're on a continual basis, going back and forth. And then all of a sudden, here you are, and there, all you could think of is run to the next wastebasket, or anywhere that you can go. So we'll never forget those days. But I'll tell you, we saved a lot of men. It was to our joy, because we said, just think, their parents wondering, is my John or Joe coming back home? Is anybody coming home? When they heard, so many people being killed, you know, on the islands and stuff. My mother used to comb, like she said, she told us, she used to comb the paper, newspapers, every item. She wouldn't leave an item untouched to see if our names were in any of them. Because when the way we told her, at first they didn't want us to tell our parents where they were taking us. How we knew when they were preparing us for the invasion, we had mosquito bars and nets, and then we had gloves that they provided, you know, for the. So then we knew we were going to a warm climate. We knew that wasn't Alaska at the time. I mean, the way it's built now and stuff. But we knew it wasn't Hawaii because we were in Hawaii. We were in there 5 months in Hawaii. They sort of detoured because they didn't want the enemy, because they were always, the kamikazes, were always trying to bomb anything that was United States, you know, any settlement, any ship, and especially women. They wanted to grab the women like Lady and that, and then they were prisoners of war, and you should have, we've seen some of those girls. Their hair that was light brown was so white, flecked from fear, and everything else that they didn't know where they were even. I can tell you that's the gospel truth. Mm-hmm. And we said, well, that's not going to happen here to us, and it didn't, because we put everything we had, all our energy, right in. We were there, we knew we had to work, and we were there to help. We said, this isn't the playground, this is a duty, and we have to have our men home back. That's what we did.
Well, you must have had separate quarters for sleeping, but you ate in the same mess hall with all the men?
We ate with all the men and that, but we did have separate quarters for the nurses, the officers. But the nice thing we had, one of the civilian nurses from Florida, her name was Robinson, yeah. We had her, and she said, well, I will make something special. She said, for all the officers that come in, and the fellas that you bring in, you know, they would come and they knew that the nurses, we paid extra money to have extra rations so that we had more vegetables and things like that, you know. So that's what we did, and that's the way we did it. And it was fun, because a lot of those other poor guys, so we told the woman in charge, the dietitian, we said, Robbie, go and hire these other fellas and give them some money and give them good meals that we're here from our allowance, from our pay. Go ahead and use it. So she did. And that's the way they were happier too, because they got to have the good meals and stuff like we did, and so did the others.
Now, the nursing facilities or the hospital where you worked, was it tents?
Tents.
Always tents.
And then after the tents, wait, let's see how long ago. Then they had, where was it that? Oh, I'm just trying to think of the island where it was bombed, and there were some of the parts, tables like that they had. They wove things. They were making clothes. Some of what they call them the gooks, the everyday poor set of people. And all they knew was how to weave, you know, to make their own clothes, so that's what they used. So that's what we were confronted with, these people too. So we just let them go and do what they wanted to, because they knew how to use the paddles and things to make their own clothes, so we didn't have anything to worry about them. They took care of themselves that way. But then the hospital gave them food different times. Instead of throwing it to scraps or so, they wanted to give it to them, some of them. Because the food was good, because some days you just couldn't eat, you didn't feel like it. You just couldn't, you're too tired. That's the way it was. And then, but when my mother wanted to know, they sent the letters and said, could you possibly tell us where we are? And she knew, and my sister knew that we couldn't. She told my mother, my older sister, who worked for the government and for the OPA, she said, they can't tell you. When they tell you, then they will send you something of recognition. Then you'll know. So they said they waited and waited for several weeks because we weren't allowed to send any mail at that particular time. And then so when we had a chance we hit Hawaii and we landed there. And when we went to one of the stores, department stores, the only store that they had there at the time when we were there was called the Liberty Bell. And when we were there, we bought up a nice little bottle of perfume for my sister to send it to her. Then she would relate it to my parents. They would know we're in a warm climate somewhere. So that's how they knew, because we sent the nice bottle and it was in the shape of a flower. It was made that way out of wood, out of the teak wood that they had. It was very nice. And I think there was just about this much perfume, maybe half an ounce, only that's all, not much, but the elaborate work that was done on it, it was beautiful, yeah.
You mentioned mosquito nets. Did you have a lot of mosquito problems?
Well, they figured at night when we slept on the cots, we had to put in our, what did we call it? We had our Vel packs. We put our Vel packs first, and then we put the mosquito nets on and we were able to tuck them because they held them down, which was good. They couldn't enter, see. We found out a way to devise them. Oh, we could think about it and laugh now. Just laugh your head.
So then the atomic bomb fell, and soon after, I assume, you came home?
Well, it wasn't too long. We had to wait till they, we had to have, Congress was trying to make reservations for the different guys that were sick, that were hurt, to transport them back to USA, to the Walter Reed Hospital and the others, you know, in the United States, to house them there because they didn't want anything else to happen, or some of the crazy Japanese. They were short guys, but they were mean looking, you know. I wouldn't want one of those guys on a bit. I don't care if he thought he was the best guy. I still wouldn't want the Japanese. They're very sly and tricky. They would say one thing to you and they're ready to knife you in the back. They were very brutal. So we had to watch out. There were different things but that's the way we slept. We slept on our Vel packs, which was good, but we had the stuff. And then we put the mosquito nets right over, and that held them down, see?
So you had enemy patients as well?
Oh, yeah.
As your own.
Oh, we had a lot of patients. I don't even know what the mark was because we couldn't keep them count. As soon as we got them in, we got them fixed up. They were suitable for travel. Right away, the helicopters came in. They got them on the stretch. They had them on the stretchers ready to take them in. That's the way they took them in, hung them up, you know, up and on to the United States right away. Because I said they weren't going to take any chances. They just said move it because there were thousands others they wanted to bring home. There were a lot of casualties, a lot.
How did you get home?
Well, my sister and I, we came aboard ship. We got back by ship. The great ship, what did they call that? There was a special name. They sang about it all the time. I forget it now. There were so many incidents and so many. It wasn't the. Let's see. Tabinta was the little ship that I came on, and it had 3 chains only on it. That's the ship my other friends, 12 of us, were on that little boat, we called it, because it wasn't very large, I'll tell you. It was a small vehicle. Well, we said anything that we can get to go home or get to our own outfit to the 233rd General Hospital. That's what I was with and my friends. But the way it happened, when we hit Hawaii, they sent us to the 147 General Hospital up on a hill. And in the hill was the background where you can see all the lights at night. All of Hawaii. It was beautiful.
From Hawaii, then another ship home?
And we took care of patients that were shipped down. The 147 General Hospital was taking our patients in. And then they shipped them from there, as I say, home to the Walter Reed Hospital or the others that were around. I don't recall the other ones because the only one that I was familiar was Walter Reed because I had seen it before I went overseas. My sister gave us a little trip, what you call putting, how did she express it? Oh, I forget now. We had,
What have you done since you got out of the service?
well, we came home and of course, everybody wanted us. Everybody came over every day, our friends, you know, were near home. They knew that we made it. They wanted to know, they would ask my mother, did your two daughters come home? Did they make it or were they prisoners of war? They were afraid of that because we were lucky that, boy, I'm telling you, we prayed. We worked and we prayed. And we did, and we had services. You know, they had, we had one, we didn't care who the minister was, whether he was Catholic or Lutheran or Protestant or whatever he was. We didn't care because we accepted and we said, that's the next best thing that we have available for us now. And God sees us up above it. And if he wants us, he's gonna take us. He's not gonna worry who, of all these, we had 5 Lutheran ministers aboard our ship.
Oh.
And it was funny, like I say. You get to learn to accept anything and everybody. Because when you're there, you're all in one.
So did you continue nursing all your life?
Well, not all my life, because then I came home, my mother, we both, they wanted us to take at least a month off, which we did. And then she went back to West Penn Hospital. She was doing anesthesia there. And I took care of my grandmother that had meningitis. She got sick, and my mother was beyond herself. She couldn't get any fluids or anything to take care of her. So she called my sister and I, and she called her first, and then she called me. So the two of us worked together, and we got her through it. She lived to be 95. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been here for that long. So we did all kind of things. But like some say, why didn't you marry? I said, because I felt an obligation to my grandmother, who was an orphan, came to this country from Europe. And she said they heard about the Statue of Liberty in Europe. And she said she had a stepmother who was very mean to them. She had 2 daughters of her own. And she took her daughters and brought them and put them in the house that my father, that her husband had. And I had to sleep in a tent. So what do you say to that? You can't fight it. But then we found out that when we were aboard ship and all these casualties that were here, we said, my God, there's got to be an end to this sometime, sooner or later. And we said, whatever we have to do, we'll do till they don't need us anymore. And that's the way it ended. So then they said you have to have at least 29 points, they decided. If we have 29 points, the big ship, I forget the name of that ship. I know it, but I have it written down elsewhere in the order sheet that I have for my copies at home. I can't think of it now. But anyway, it was a huge ship that carried troops at one time. And they brought us home to the States, to Washington, D.C. Washington State, Seattle, back to Seattle. Then they had a elevator in the Seattle building where you can go all the way down, or you can go all the way up. Wherever you want to go, you can get off on. It was an unusual thing that we'd seen, but that's the way it was. That's the way we did. So we went and did the town. There were about 12 of us, because it was so long since we've seen any civilian clothes. We wanted to look. We got to Washington, D.C. finally, and we wanted to see these different stores and that. And we did go, I'm telling you, just like a woman would want to. And, and we said, well, when we sat down to eat,